And then 2 months later, after the trailer got released on YouTube, Arcturan was finally released to the level servers for everyone to try out. If you don't know what this level is, Arcturan is a level created by TheJShadow and various others, which is an entire dungeon crawling RPG game in Geometry Dash. And at the start, you can choose a class. You can choose melee or magic. I chose melee, which is the option on the left. And basically, what you're supposed to do in this level, there are 6 different dungeons that get progressively harder than the last. And you also have a world hub where you can get upgrades like get better armor, increase the amount of health you can get from drinking health potions. And at the start of the game, you start with a basic sword, but you can get coins where you can unlock different weapons, and the higher tier the dungeon, the better weapons you can unlock. After the last stream, I did watch, so yeah, you have the armor shop, you have the potion shop, and there's also like a library of sorts, but that doesn't really matter. And also, after you complete each dungeon, you have to speak to the king. For like lore purposes, that doesn't really matter because I don't show it in this video. So at the beginning here, you hold the start on dungeon 1, which is the first dungeon, like I said, that you enter, the Mausoleum of King Arcturan, which is basically like a skeleton-filled dungeon. There's undead enemies that you have to fight. As you can see, the sword I have doesn't have a whole lot of range, especially on like the skeleton enemies that I have to deal with. I managed to get pretty far at the start, but eventually when I got to the boss fight, I did not survive very long. But luckily, if you have the Arcturan Plus mod, you can save your progress in this level. And with the coins that I accumulated from my first run of the dungeon, I used it to buy an upgraded weapon. I decided to sell with the metal great axe, and there is a loadout point of interest where you can equip new weapons. Equip that there. And as you can see, I also got an armor upgrade, which most of the armor upgrades I got off camera. Now, what makes each of the dungeons unique is that there's dynamic platforming. Like, as you can see, there's wall jumps that you have to do. Now, this part was kind of annoying because of, like, dynamic interaction with, like, advanced platformer gameplay. And then I come across my first boss, which wasn't too big of an issue because not only was I able to deal a lot of damage with my weapon, but also you can just go back and forth and continuously hit him, and just like that I was able to defeat him with ease. Consumed a health potion just to top up on my health, and then this is like a very similar part where there's like a section where you have to progress fast with the water rising, but that wasn't too much of an issue. And this you have to continue traveling because there's skeletons in the background that are shooting arrows. Not too big of an issue, managed to pass through it really quickly. Now, a problem I did have with the Great Axe is it's not a very fast weapon, so dealing with enemies that walk fast isn't the best. And then I finally reach the final boss where I have to fight King Arcturan, the Royal Phantom. Now, the only problem I have with this boss is that his attacks are not very well indicated, as you can see right here. Then he summons a Spear Phantom, and then he drags his axe to create a shockwave, and there's no like indicator whether he's coming at you. Just like, as you can see, he rushed at me like that. But with no health pots and very low health, I managed to take him down. Oh. No. Go for it. I did it. And with that, the first dungeon was complete. Managed to get enough money to upgrade my armor, and also every time you kill enemies, you slowly level up, and the more you level up, the more health you get. And I also equipped a second attack to enter into the second dungeon, but unfortunately I did not survive very long there. So I decided to go for an upgraded weapon, which is the iron hammer, which is basically an upgrade version of the bow axe that I previously had. And then I enter the Forgotten Keep, which you face a lot of arachnid enemies, which, to be honest, the arachnid enemies aren't too bad until you face the final boss. And here are the unique platforming experiences. You hold down levers to create an obstacle to progress further. And the steam here from these pipes will actually hurt you, by the way. And another dynamic platformer ability is empowerment orbs, which give you a dash ability to go through certain walls which have the red gemstone on it. Now, this part of the dungeon was by far the most annoying part, where there is a moving cube which does a significant amount of damage if you touch it. And I believe right here, yeah, I accidentally miss a ledge, so I actually have to rush back and end up taking a little damage in the process. This was also an annoying part about the dash ability, because there's a chance that you could overshoot and miss certain platforms. Now, this part with the moving cubes was a lot more tolerable just because they're smaller. And another ability with the dash power-up is that you can actually attack enemies there. And after progressing a bit far, I was facing my first boss, which is definitely inspired by Skeletron Prime from Terraria, I will say. But I will say this first boss wasn't exactly too bad. My Iron Hammer was doing a lot of damage, and also this boss's attacks were really sight readable. And at some point he does regenerate his arms, but I managed to take him out with absolute ease. Ooh, that was close. I got him though. And then you eventually kill the skeleton that controls him. Now this is the part where it was starting to get a little bit stressful. As you can see, swinging axe is definitely inspired by the men here. There's also parts where you have to use the red dash orb ability multiple times very fast, because the red power-up will go off at some point. And I finally reached the second boss, the Queen of Harvesters. And this was by far one of the most annoying bosses early into the game, because not only does this boss have a wide variety of attacks, but its attacks also do poison damage, which of course slowly dwindles down your health over time. Crap. Dude. And during a certain part of the attack, the spider boss summons spiders to take you down, which the spiders aren't too bad, but that web grappling hook attack, if you get stuck by that, that does a significant amount of damage. You do not want to take damage from it. Just take my word for it. But with no health pots left, I did finally manage to take down Shelob, aka the spider boss. Move. Yes! Oh my gosh, that was so close. Oh. And just like that, Dungeon 2 was complete, and I was making really good progress. And then that's when I discovered the Arcanum place, which would have been helpful to know at the start of the game, where you can equip armor runes to have like 10% max HP, defense, or poison immunity, which would have been especially helpful in that dungeon, mind you. So obviously I selected the one that gives me more health, and at the start of Dungeon 3, I end up buying a sword called the Leviathan. I'll go with the Leviathan. And this is the start of day 2. I was exploring Dungeon 3, getting the feel for it, which is definitely an aquatic, sunken city style dungeon, where I was facing some aquatic mobs, and although some of the mobs that I fought were not only tough, but the ones that swim in the water are extraordinarily fast. Not a super effective weapon in terms of speed. And the unique dynamic platforming part about this section is the bubble orbs, which basically propels you forward depending on the momentum key you hold. And as you can see, I am fighting the first boss, the Maw of the Sea, which so far isn't too bad, but sometimes its attacks are a little bit unforgiving. But eventually I did manage to take it out with little to no problems whatsoever. I see how that works, kind of. And yeah, this is the part of the underwater section. Yeah, the swimming enemies come at you pretty fast. And also, I find a bug where the swimming enemies come through the ground and end up destroying me, unfortunately. I get a little bit frustrated about that. So I fast travel and eventually decide to change my weapon to the gold chakram. And the gold chakram was actually pretty effective for a little bit, but I think I end up switching back at some point. I actually managed to take down the mob to see actually quicker this time. But even still, against the swimming enemies, like the gold chakram isn't still super fast to keep them at bay. Now this part wasn't exactly the most fun, where you have to stay in the safe zones when the pipes release water, otherwise you take a lot of damage. Although for some reason I don't take damage there, for some reason. But eventually I do manage to get past after spending a long time with it. And then I was at the second boss, which is the TheJShadow Ray. Which, this boss fight is unique because you can actually have a lot of space to move, but unfortunately I die pretty quickly due to having not a lot of health pots. But I eventually switched to Leviathan, which proved to be a lot better because it has a lot more of a surrounding range than the gold chakram did. But I was able to learn this boss attacks pretty quickly, and I ended up killing the TheJShadow Ray. Yes! I beat him! And as a result, the boss ended up unlocking a weapon, which is a mace, which inflicts shadow flame debuffs. I also unlocked a second armor rune, which I gave myself plus 10% more damage, because more damage is always good. And I moved on to Dungeon 4, which is a desert-themed dungeon, as you can probably tell by the aesthetic, with mummies, and a unique platforming skill that I had to learn was the grappling hook feature, and also there's hidden booby traps as well, which is very fitting for a desert dungeon of this type. But I will say the grappling hook mechanics were a little bit hard to master, and eventually I come across the first boss, which was definitely one of the harder ones that I had faced so far, because not only does it attack frequently, but you also do not have a lot of space to move around, as you can probably tell. But it also summons a lot of enemies, so it's really easy to get cornered, and I ended up dying as a result. I'm 1 HP. Damn. But I ended up coming back pretty quickly and ended up defeating the Pharaoh, Undead Pharaoh, whatever you want to call him. But I was, at this point, I had low health, and I ended up dying to a pretty beefy gladiator. But I came back shortly after on my third run and defeated him pretty easily. But I ended up crossing another one of those guys. And at this point, I was on really low health, even though I managed to take him down. And then I was also had to run away from a boulder from Indiana Jones that was slowly coming my way. Still took a lot of damage. Came across the second boss, but at this point I was also really low on health, and I ended up dying to him. Oh, dang. Okay, he lands fast. This ended up being by far the longest time I took on a dungeon. Dungeon 4 was no walk in the park, essentially. Because not only do you have to beat him in the tomb, you also have to beat him in his own dimension. And in his own dimension, he is a lot more powerful. And I had no heals left, and I only had 23 HP, but I ended up getting cornered. Crap, I'm dead, man. And so I had to go back again. Health was still not looking great, but I was a little bit more cautious this time. But even still, like, he still managed to do a lot of damage to me. But by some miracle, I actually dodged one of his deadliest attacks and killed him. Yes! Oh my gosh, that was so close. I actually completed Dungeon 5. And going into my third day of this, I unlocked Dungeon 5, so I immediately decided to go for a weapon called the Combustion Blade, and also TheJShadow was in my chat. I didn't know whether it was you or not. With the blade equipped, I entered the Infernal Stronghold, aka Dungeon 5. Now, this dungeon was the one that took me the longest to complete by far. This ended up taking me almost an hour and a half to fully complete, because not only did I take fire damage from the enemy's attacks, there were also some really annoying ones that I encountered along the way. But the dynamic platforming of this is that there's basically hidden orange jump orbs which give you a large boost. Ended up fighting a mini boss which is like a magma golem. Ended up taking him out with relative ease, and I was progressing pretty well until I came into this room. That enemy that you see right there is by far the deadliest enemy that I had come across so far outside of the bosses. Not only does it attack really far, but also does a charge attack which you can't really jump over. But I defeated him pretty quickly, and I was facing the first boss. Now, the first boss has a lot of health, and he is also very quick. So it wasn't super easy to take him out, but I ended up taking him out without super relative issues. Now, there's another part where you basically have like a limited time jetpack ability with where you're flying a riding skeleton, which is pretty fun, but it's also really hard to control. The gravity is very weird using this ability. Ow. So, and it's really easy to like overshoot certain sections, as you saw right there. After doing another section like this where you light a bunch of lamps, I had to face another like giant version of a blaze from Minecraft, essentially. And then all of a sudden, I was taken into the second boss fight, which was undoubtedly the most annoying boss fight out of the bunch, because not only was he tough, but also later on the attack indicators for him would end up getting bugged. So it was pretty much impossible to predict where he was going to attack, as you'll see pretty soon. See, look at that. Absolutely stupid, right? And at this point, I had no health potions. I ended up dying to this boss a second time. But I actually ended up killing him with only 9 HP remaining. And I thought I was in the clear. Oh, wait. But then another problem arose. Because this dungeon actually has 3 bosses. And this boss is the Fire Titan. Well, luckily the Fire Titan attacks a lot slower, and his attacks are much more easier to predict, but I still ended up dying. Dude, this is so hard. I do believe I eventually end up switching my combustion blade for the Molten Disc. And if you remember, the gold chakram that I used earlier, which is pretty much a similar weapon, didn't end up doing so well for me. But I was actually doing pretty well in this boss fight. I had a decent amount of HP and still 1 health pot remaining. I also hit level 30, which is the highest level that you can reach, by the way, in terms of leveling up your health. And I eventually took down the Fire Titan with almost no issues. Flaming Titan, you're going down. Bang! And I had a health pot to spare. And now after unlocking Dungeon 6, I eventually ended up unlocking the Paragon Blade, which progressively gets stronger the more you use it. And this was the final dungeon, which ended up actually being one of the easiest ones, funny enough. And this dungeon combines all of the special abilities from the previous dungeons into this one, including some unique ones included in this dungeon as well. As you can see, the wall climb, taking out some frozen enemies right here, struggling with the water abilities here. And then after I reached the top, I hit an orb which basically destroys the entire tower and creates a massive shockwave, which is pretty cool. And this is like very similar to the part from the first dungeon, but instead of skeletons shooting arrows, it's cannons shooting at you. Well, I have no choice but to drop down, don't I? Well, I'll climb some more, basically progress through this dungeon, not super interesting stuff. Finessed with the seesaw mechanics a bit more. And I came across the first boss, which looks very similar to the Crystal Gauntlet boss fight from Abstract Dark's level, if any of you guys remember that. And basically, you don't attack this boss directly. You basically take out its minions that you summon, which deals damage to the boss over time. I still take a lot of damage and ended up using a lot of my spare health pots, but took down the boss regardless. But at this point, I had extremely, really low HP. Used the dash ability from Dungeon 2 in this level, and after ascending into a room above, I was faced with a giant gladiator, which unfortunately I would end up dying to. I'm dead. Luckily, that would be the only time I died in this dungeon. I came back with 1 health HP, which still wasn't the best, mind you. Ended up taking the ice gladiator out. Climbed another tower with a bunch of cannons automatically aiming at me. Used the skeleton jetpack ability, which was still the most annoying to control. Ended up taking out another ice gladiator giant, and I was facing the final enemy. Alright, is it boss time? It's boss time. I have 1 heal. So, this final enemy was the final step into completing this level. Luckily, once you enter the boss fight, your health goes all the way up to full, so you fully regenerate for this boss fight. Your health potions don't regenerate, but luckily I still had a health potion left to spare. Otherwise, I don't believe I would have been able to win this boss fight, really. Basically, after taking him down, he enters his second phase where he has wings, and you fight him inside his castle. This is when... Okay, now he has wings. And this weapon was proving to be a mighty adversary against this guy. And if you freeze, there's a cool mechanic where if you spam the jump button, you can actually break out the ice. He grabs one of the pillars, but unfortunately I wasn't able to dodge it in time. Took a lot of damage from that as well. But I was ready for him to drop his second pillar, and I was able to farm a lot of damage off of him. And after dealing a lot more damage, it was time for the third and final boss fight. I'm just going for it. Alright, third phase. So, basically the third phase of the boss fight is basically a tug of war in terms of damage. You do not have a health pot. You basically have to deal... every time you deal damage, your bar goes up. But every time he deals damage to you, his bar goes up. And basically at this point, he was on extremely low health, and I was able to take him down with absolute ease. No issues whatsoever. GG. Oh, did I do it? Wait, did I do it? Wait. I did it! Let's go! TheJShadow said it. Let's go! Hands down, easily the best platformer level ever. And I get GG's from TheJShadow himself. Thank you so much for sticking by in the streams, dude. You and Moistened Egg are the goats of platformer mode. Hands down. And 16 Lord. Shouts to all the playtesters, including 16 Lord. The land of Arcturan is set in unease. Let's go. It is done.